Hey, welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be going over how to remove and replace a brake rotor on your Cyrusher tire. So ways to tell if your brake rotor is bent and if it needs to be replaced. Oftentimes, brake rotors can be bent slightly due to big jumps or hitting big rocks. If it's bent just a little bit and it just barely touches your brake pads and makes a little noise, but the wheel rolls okay, I wouldn't worry about that too much. What we're mainly concerned with is if your brake rotor is severely touching your brake pads, there's a significant notice of loss of rotation from the tire when you rotate it in the frame. Or if you can physically see the rotor just really bending one way or the other as it rotates around inside the frame, those are usually signs that your brake rotor is bent or needs to be replaced. If your brake rotor is cracked or broken at all, that needs to be replaced immediately before you ride it again. You can see in this example of the wheel we're going to be fixing today that that rotor really takes a nice dive to the left in this current view, and that is beyond repair. So we're going to be fixing that. We're going to be replacing a brake rotor on a front wheel for one of our bikes. This bike, I don't know the history of it, but it was severely bent, maybe in a big jump or hit a big rock or something, but this rotor needs to be replaced, so we're going to be doing that today. And let's hop into it. So for today's video, we're going to need a micro blowtorch here for removing the rotor. We're going to need some protective gloves, and we're going to need a 3mm Allen key, as well as your replacement brake rotor. Okay, so now that you have your wheel off and it's ready to be laid flat, go ahead and lay that out on a table so the rotor's facing up. And what we're going to do then is to proceed to take the screws off. And for that, we're going to need to loosen them up. So this next step would be to get your gloves and your micro blowtorch. The screws we're going to be removing each have Loctite on them. If you don't know what Loctite is, it's essentially a substance that kind of bonds the metal of the bolt or screw to whatever frame it's being screwed into or bolted into. In order to get that off, we'll just heat it up and kind of break up that bond a little bit. So we're going to do that. So as you can see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws we're going to have to remove here, and they each have Loctite on them. So step number 1 is going to be to put your gloves on, and we're going to heat up those screws a little bit. Okay, so again, the reason we're doing this is to break up that blue stuff that you saw on the screw. It's called Loctite. By heating up these screws, it'll kind of break that bond and make it easier to unthread them from the hub. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little blowtorch here, pick this one up at a local hardware store, and I'm just going to take and heat up each of these screws a little bit to kind of break that bond, and then from there we're going to loosen them and take the screws out. So is so I don't get my oily hands over this brake rotor. I like to keep the brake rotor clean. So oil and brake pads don't do very well together. So what I'm going to do is just use these gloves. That way I can touch this and not have to worry about it. So I've loosened these two. Now I'm going to loosen these last two here. Another important thing is to make sure that your Allen key is seated down all the way in. these guys and see if I can't tighten them a little bit. That one's tight, that one's tight, that one's tight, that one's tight. That one turned a little bit, and that one's tight. So after you've replaced and tightened your brake rotor, it's good to just put it back in the fork, and it should be straight up and down as you rotate the wheel around. Hopefully you can see for this angle, this new rotor is perfectly straight. I'll turn it this way so you can see as well. No bends in it at all, straight up and down along with the wheel. And that's what you want out of your brake rotor. If you have problems with your brake rotor, reach out to us at Cyrusher Support. We have spare brake rotors and parts we can send to